We are on the downward stretch, downhill roll to the end of the day, and it's nice to go after a nice, like, upper kind of guy like Doug. As Sachin said, thank you for that intro. I'm Susan Kimberlin. I am an angel investor and advisor to early stage startups. And this is a little bit more about just who I am, where I'm coming from. So I'm doing that full time, and I like the fact that, well, I'm doing it as much as I want to do, which is nice. I wouldn't describe it as like a 40-hour-a-week kind of thing. It kind of depends from week to week, day to day. I'm also a limited partner and a general partner in several funds that all of which also invest in early stage companies. I'm a mentor at Acceleprise. If some of you heard Whitney Sales earlier, she runs the Acceleprise program. It's an accelerator for B2B SaaS companies. And I love working with them. I also work with other accelerators in the B2B SaaS space here in San Francisco. My background's in linguistics and natural language processing. As Sachin mentioned, I ran the search teams at Salesforce for about 7 years as product manager, which is gives you a good idea of why I'm interested in B2B, since and especially B2B SaaS, and Salesforce kind of invented that category. And I invest in B2B and enterprise SaaS companies at the very early stage. I also invest in diversity and inclusion, particularly in the entrepreneurship, VC space, and in technology. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that I'm the founding investor in Backstage Capital. Backstage Capital invests in underrepresented founders, so women, people of color, and LGBT founders. And I will talk a little bit more about diversity, do my pitch for diversity a little bit later on. Fun fact, I'm also in an a cappella group. And I've been known to do karaoke at corporate events and other places, and basically anytime there's karaoke available. So that's me singing. Just to kind of give you an idea of some of the other things that I like to do. I love an audience. So who do I invest in? And I should say actually that you'll notice there's a lot of questions in this presentation. I think that basically as an angel investor, the thing that I do the most, that a good angel investor does the most, is ask lots of questions. Individual founders, people working on products, they have a lot of knowledge about what they're doing, but somebody who comes in and asks the right questions can both help expose the things that you need to work on, and also that's what we need to do in order to get a full picture to make a choice about whether to invest or not. So before I move on, how many people in the room have pitched to an angel investor, tried to get an angel investor to invest? All right, awesome. How many people are in the process of fundraising right now? And I think it's no secret, if you're running a startup, you're always fundraising. And how many people are thinking about fundraising in the next, say, 12 months? All right, okay. So you guys all have a vested interest in what an angel investor might be looking for. Good to know. All right, so who do I invest in? As I said, mostly B2B and a handful of enterprise SaaS startups. I have dabbled in consumer a little bit and gotten stung a little bit. So I like B2B, and I'll talk more about what it is that I like about B2B and what makes it distinctive. I've made 22 angel investments starting in 2012, but most of them since 2015, as well as 3 fund investments. And I am proud to say only about 4 or 5 years in that my current portfolio value has nearly doubled. One of the things about early stage investing is that it takes a long time before you see a return. It's a good idea to keep track of what valuation your companies that you've invested in are at, but you can't really expect to see an accurate reflection of what you're going to get out of your investments until 7 to 10 years down the line. There's a handful of companies, logos up here. These are all companies I've invested in. There's a couple here. I see a couple founders here that are in my portfolio. So welcome, guys. And also, why are you here? I already angel invested in you. So you don't need to know this stuff, but thank you for your support. Actually, one more thing about that. Another fun fact, my first angel investment that I ever made is by far, valuation-wise, the most successful, which is super exciting. Unusual, most of the time your first angel investment is like, you should be prepared to write that off. My second is in the process of wrapping up business and closing, so I lost that investment completely, which I think is representative of the experience of doing angel investing, especially at a higher volume. If you're not just dabbling, if this is kind of what you do, you have to expect that you're going to get a lot of different outcomes, and people are at like various different stages. I've had 3 companies close up business. I've had 1 that got acquired. I've not had any that have gone public. That doesn't happen all that frequently, and certainly it would be too early anyway. And I've had lots and lots of like pivots. People change their business and they move on. What I invested in is no longer what they're doing, basically. Okay, so what do I look for in a potential angel investment? And this is sort of true of all angel investments. These are important things to be prepared for. These are questions that it's important for you to be able to answer if you're pitching an angel. And if angels are not asking you these questions, then they're probably not. They probably don't know what they need to know, essentially, in order to make their choice. Which, sometimes if you can get the money anyway, maybe it's fine. These are in priority order because I'm a product manager at heart and I prioritize everything. Hard to stop that. So number 1 thing is team. Early stage, you don't have a long track record with this company. You may have a lot of experience, but this company, this product, if I'm talking to you, you're really early stage. It's probably just a couple of founders, if that. And so who you are, what you are bringing to it, is the strongest indicator of how successful you're going to be. And also, do I want to work with you? At the early stage, you're going to have a handful of angel investors. You need to have a good relationship with them because you're going to work together more than, and you're going to need to leverage them for other things besides just that first check. Next is opportunity. So who are you selling to? What is the market? What's your TAM, your total addressable market? This is really important, second only to team, because the opportunity, your target market, your potential market that you can reach is what the eventual return for me as an investor is tied to. So I need to see that there's a significant opportunity there that you can grow into and I can potentially get a huge return from. Then next, sort of kind of hand in hand with each other, what problem are you solving, and is it compelling? Is it something that a significant number of businesses and potential buyers are grappling with? And then how are you solving it? What's your product or solution? A big thing about what your product and solution is how effective is it going to be at solving that problem? And is it like technically feasible? Something that, depending on what your background is, there's a lot of people around, I think, especially in the Bay Area, that are technical. And so they have a good grasp of what is like possible, whether they can build something, but then sometimes growth is hard, scaling is hard, those kinds of things. So really having like a viable solution is always important. And then a couple things that are like, need to check them off when I'm looking at an angel investment. Key metrics, yes, everybody sort of looks at certain metrics. I do too. Do you have traction? What does it look like? Do you have a pipeline of potential customers? Is it healthy? Do they seem closable? Sort of there's a lot of KPIs that I think sort of later stage VCs look at that I would look at as well if they're there, but some of these things are not present yet when it's really early stage. And last, sort of a checkbox, but can be like a deal killer. Where are you at in terms of building your company? How much funding have you taken? What stage are you at? Especially for angel investors, it's much more likely that you're going to be too late stage either you're raising on a really large valuation that makes my small check not really compelling for me in terms of how much equity I'm going to get, or occasionally you could be too small, like you really, taking outside money is not a great idea yet because you haven't built enough of the product and the idea out. And then there's a couple things that I want to get out of the deal as well. One thing is that I want to be able to add more value besides the money. I want to provide expertise, provide network, provide a sounding board. I have some founders I work with that call me and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. It feels like maybe it's not a great idea in terms of like how it's going to be perceived, or sort of as like a kind of like an emotional kind of sounding board, things like that. So what do I have that I can bring besides just the money? And I think if you are engaging with angel investors, they need to be strategic because you're still small, so you need to get as much as you can out of every person that you engage with. So you should be getting more than just money. And then also, I want to learn something. I look for companies where there's something about it. There's part of the business model that I've never really had a lot of hands-on experience with, or they're working in an industry that I want to learn more about. Great example is like me trying to get my head around like cryptocurrencies because it's all the rage, but I'm like, what is that? And like, how can I approach that as an angel investor? So on the hunt for companies where there's an opportunity for me to invest and then learn something. Then, oopsie, there we go. So if that's kind of what I'm looking for in all angel investments, then what is it about B2B businesses that brings me to focus on them? One thing that I think sort of one of the most important things about B2B businesses, and hopefully all of you as practitioners and people who are working in the space can feel this too, that your customer's success, your customer is a business, their success at their business is what your success is driven off of. I think that's incredibly important. That's something that we focused on, thought about, talked about a lot during my time at Salesforce when we grew 10x between 2007 and 2014. And an important piece of that is understanding how your customer thinks about their business, thinks about growing it, how your customer measures their growth in their business, and being able to articulate to them how your product or service is going to be able to affect their bottom line and make their business more successful. And that's sort of a core, kind of like a fundamental thing about B2B businesses that I think is like kind of bottom line when it comes to defining what your product is. So as an investor, I want to see that you understand that and that you have that sense for your customers of how to talk to them about what their success is and how to talk to them about how you're going to help them with that. I think also with B2B businesses, there's more money on the table than in consumer businesses. And so for me as an investor, I like that because that means more potential upside for me. You're talking to businesses that have a bottom line, they're trying to make their business run. If they have a problem or they just have something that could work better and can help them get more business, help them make money, and you can enable that, then they're willing to pay for your product. And there's more often budget already established that you can hook into. It's important to be able to find that budget, but you can hook into that. So there's sort of like there's more money available sooner in the process of engaging with customers. And the value of an individual customer or contract is usually a lot higher than in consumer businesses, certainly. And then as a product person, I always enjoy the fact about B2B businesses that you have access to more feedback often from customers. They are trying to use your product, once you have customers, obviously. They're trying to use your product and they're as part of their day-to-day process. if they're having an issue, they're usually pretty vocal about letting you know. They're like, hey, I'm paying you, I have this problem, I need help to like fix it, I need you to fix it, or I need you to know that like this isn't working perfectly for me. Certainly as a product manager, I always enjoyed that aspect of working with customers. They were much more motivated to give me feedback. And that's a great thing when you're building products, when you're building new products, because it helps you kind of get to that product market fit. So then, what is distinctive about B2B angel investments? So what does it take everything about making angel investments and everything about B2B and put that together? There's a handful of things where these are things that I want to know you as a founder, if I'm considering investing, have a grasp on. Do you know who your buyer is and what their budget is? I was just talking about budget, that there's often more available, but you need to know what it is. It helps with pricing, which you guys have been hearing about off and on all day. Knowing who the buyer is, you've been hearing about that too when talking about distribution and sales. So knowing where to go, who's going to have the money, who's going to pay you for your product, incredibly important. Another thing about B2B, about selling into B2B companies, is that the person who is the buyer is not necessarily the person who is the user. Classic example using like just Salesforce CRM as an example. Sales manager has the budget and the interest, is motivated to have a CRM tool, but sales reps are using it almost more than the sales manager is. Their sort of needs, wants, desires are different from the sales manager, but the sales manager is the person who's going to write you the check and actually like buy your product, if that's what you're trying to sell them. So knowing that your user may be different from your buyer is important, and I want to know that you've identified all of those people in your target customers if I'm going to invest. Another big sort of piece of this is matching your go-to-market strategy to your market segment. And I think the most sort of classic example of this is just along the lines of, if your product is kind of designed, if you're targeting enterprise, the high end of the market, you're looking at big companies as your potential customer, are you aware of what it takes to make an enterprise sale? That stuff is really, really hard, or it takes a long time. Can you last long enough to get through the process of engaging with an enterprise customer? So is your go-to-market strategy consistent with the market segment that you're going after? Incredibly important. I want to make sure that you understand that if I'm going to invest. And I think this third point you probably can feel just from all of the talks that you've already seen, but you need to have dedicated distribution, I think, for B2B products, and you need to understand that that it's going to take more than just somebody picking up the product and using it. Once you want to scale, you're probably going to need somebody. It doesn't have to be sales. You don't need a VP of sales, maybe, at least not initially at the very early stage, but you are going to need to have some kind of structure around how you're going to shepherd users through to actually closing sales. So some kind of distribution. And then finally, the last thing is kind of a pro tip, that if I see a company knows this and is leveraging it, draws me in, that when it comes to initial sort of market or initial kind of role that you're targeting your product toward, there's more often budget in sales and distribution for businesses that's free to try new products, to go out on a limb, take a risk, if it seems like it's going to help your potential customer, help them close more business. So you can find buying budget in sales organizations. So I love products that are meant to do sales enablement and can materially help businesses close more sales, because that's that's an easy way to get at budget. So what are some other thoughts that I have? And then this slide, I'm cracking up a little bit because I just had this realization last night that I was a sugar spun angel in a production of the Nutcracker when I was like 11, and our costumes were like the color that I used as like the background for this presentation, and I've got the little angel thing, and I'm like, it was like foreshadowing. A couple of these are just kind of one-off thoughts, and then a couple are like really important. I'll start with the one-off thoughts. I'm an angel investor, so I'm working at really early stage when it's just sometimes a handful of investors and a couple of founders, and working on growing and just delivering a product to market. I think it's incredibly important to build sustainable businesses. I like working with businesses and founders that are focused on creating a product that's solving a problem that people are paying for, and what they're paying for, that revenue that you're bringing in, actually supports you producing the product and distributing it, and then hopefully gets you to profit eventually. But I like the idea of focusing on delivering product, getting something out into the world and solving a customer pain point. I have the luxury of focusing on those kinds of things at the early stage. If you are going for funding, later series funding, the focus can move away to other metrics. There can be a lot of pressure to grow at all costs and to chase metrics that are not as much about customer success and are much more about kind of taking over market share. And so it's something to think about. When I go in and talk to companies that I might angel invest in, I'm looking for somebody who is looking to build a sustainable business and has like an idea of how to do that. But there certainly is a lot of money out there, and a lot of folks who would be happy to put money in with the goal of just getting to the next round to raise. And so there's sort of like a strategic question there of, how are you approaching it? It's something that I think about. Another sort of one-off thought is, I think there are different kinds of angel investors. So it's the question of like, are you an angel? Am I an angel for life, or am I a VC in training? Because I think there are lots of people that kind of come from previous exits. Maybe they were an early engineer, an early hire at a company that's gone public and done really well. They're bringing their operational expertise and the fact that they have the capital to invest and going after investing in things that are kind of interesting to them. They tend to be great help as early stage investors. They tend to be able to help you kind of figure out how to solve problems. They'll be there with you a little bit more. There are other investors that are kind of angel investors, I should say, that are starting out by making angel investments but are really on a track to become like a partner at a VC firm. And so they're going to be really great, really kind of more focused and great at like long-term strategy and how do you get to the point of, how do you get to like that next step in raising capital and kind of going that way. And they usually have like great networks of people that can introduce you to somebody at every firm that you might want to every VC firm you might want to talk to. So it's something to think about if you're talking to an angel. What is it that you need, and sort of taking into account what their makeup is and what they're bringing from that in that regard. And then judging founder competence, I think, is like a really important part of angel investing because, as I said, the team is sort of the most important part in an early stage company. And one of the things that I like to do is ask them, so what brings you to this point in your career? How did you get here? Why are you interested in this? Why are you working on this? And I think about that the way you can think about like origin stories of superheroes. That everything that people do along the way is part of their makeup when they are embarking on building a new product, building a new company. So I like to hear how people got there in order to be able to see if they have experience that they can graft onto what they're doing now to make them successful. That's a big tool that I use for judging whether they've got the right makeup of things in order to be successful. I also like to see if they are able to teach others about what their product is. I love it if there's something that I don't understand about their business or that I don't have experience with, and I can ask them about it and they can educate me and I get it, because that speaks to both mastery of the subject, that if you're able to teach something, you've truly mastered it. If you're able to communicate it to somebody else, you can find a way to communicate it using whatever terms and strategies work for you. And it also speaks to their ability to be able to then work with others, because they're not going to be successful all on their own. They're going to need to work with other people. So if they need to be able to work with and teach other people around them about what it is that they want, what their vision is, and that kind of thing. So last but certainly not least, I mentioned before I'm an investor in Backstage Capital, and I am truly interested in diversity and inclusion, particularly around technology, and particularly around venture capital and investment. I really believe that a wide range of experiences that people bring to problem solving and to working on products gives you more options for ideas of how you might meet the challenges that you come up against. There's plenty of research that shows that more diverse teams tend to perform better, produce better. And so I like to look for at least a sort of an understanding of diversity. It's hard when there's like a 2-founder team and it's like, how diverse can you be? You are who you are. But like, do you understand that is something that is going to be an asset to you and your company as you grow a diversity of backgrounds and experiences? And that there's a lot of economic opportunity in that as well. That if you're solving in an unconventional way, or just in a way that's not as often heard, or you're getting ideas that are not as often heard because it's an underrepresented group, you're more likely to have a competitive edge because everybody else isn't necessarily thinking that way. So I think that's just a really good thing to always have in mind as you're building your company and product. So with that, my last question to you is, do you have questions for me? Yes?
As an angel investor, if you're doing early stage investment, then most likely a lot of people will pivot.
Yes.
What's your view about conflict of interest with portfolio companies?
So the question is, a lot of your early stage investment, a lot of investments, if you're going in at the early stage, have a potential to pivot. And what's my view of conflict of interest in a portfolio when that comes up? I'll say at the very early stage, a lot of stuff is done on trust. And so I'm trying to think, I don't know if I have any real conflicts. I do have a couple companies that are really near each other in terms of who their target market is and what their solution is, not identical. And when that came up, I went to both of the founders and said, hey, this is a thing, and do you trust me to not undermine your business in any way in how I interact with this other company? And they trusted me. So I think most of that, for early stage investors, you can manage that through trust and communication, because there's not a lot of formality there. On the other hand, I don't want my lawyer, my lawyer will not review my engagement on a deal if they happen to also then be representing a potential investment of mine. So, that does come up, and there's enough network around that you can find somebody else to help you out if there's going to be a potential conflict. It's a good question, though. Anybody else? Yes? How do I do my due diligence? Well, that's basically my whole job. So we would need another 28 minutes to cover that probably. But I mean, basically, I start with what materials do you have that you can give me about what your product is? Do you have a pitch deck? Do you have an executive summary, et cetera? So look at it to see if it's like a reasonably good fit in terms of my interest. And then I will have a first conversation. I'd like to meet in person if at all possible, but can do phone when geography and schedules don't allow that. And it's usually like in a coffee shop somewhere in San Francisco. And I will start with the origin story questions, and then get into what are the things that I'm interested in about their business, and can they tell me more about it, and kind of do the test for like teachability. I will dig into any of the questions that came up when I was sort of going through their initial materials. I do also ask a lot of questions kind of in flow as they're like describing their business to me. And I will often then take, if that's reasonably interesting to me, I'll ask for, can I talk to any early customers? Can I talk to other like people that you're working with, or sort of like kind of like a reference check, but it's kind of a like I want to see how other people are like perceiving it, and that's sort of also the product manager in me kind of wants to test to see like is it working, whatever they're doing. And then I'll often ask about like terms and what their timeline is and stuff. I think one of the things that's sort of rampant in the investor kind of community is that what I certainly don't, and I think a lot of us don't, like to say yes or no until we've had some time to sit with it a little bit. So part of my process is also like, I want to step back and like, am I into this? And that's a hard thing to quantify, and I can't give you any tips on how to like make this go your way if this is like, as part of like the process. But like kind of seeing how it fits in with my portfolio and everything else as well. I don't like to be rushed. Even though I spend a lot of time around products that are for salespeople and for sales enablement, I don't actually like to be like sold to too hard. So that's also, part of the process for me is just kind of making sure that like there's enough space in the process to make my decisions. I feel like I'm way out of time. I don't even actually know what's going on with the timer, but I feel like I'm way out of time. Does anybody else have a question before I go? All right, well, my contact information is here. You guys will be able to get a hold of me. And thank you so much.